I want to build this app, right? And so I go talk to a bunch of software engineers and they tell me how I want to build it and what I want to do with it. I sort of went through 6 months of this because I had a thought of sort of developing something. I came to the realization, why don't I just build it myself?
It is hard to understate the impact that artificial intelligence will have on everything. But don't take it from, generic news sources. Don't take it from a guru who makes a living off selling courses and content. Don't take it from somebody who is from an industry where 100% of their work can be done behind a computer. Take it from the people who are doing what you're doing and can show you proof.
The thing that I see that will be the advantage for engineers in the future will be the fact that they play with it, they experiment with it, and they actually experience it.
And the way I use artificial intelligence is I'm not falling asleep at the wheel. I'm not letting it take the reins. I am simply using it as my thought partner to extend me at a level of creativity I otherwise wouldn't be able to do.
What happens when the real shift in engineering isn't about a new design method, but a new kind of operator? Today's guest is Nick Heim, someone whose career began inside technical consulting and field-based engineering work, who now sits unusually close to where AI adoption is actually happening inside engineering firms. As the host of the AEC AI and Tech and Strategy podcast, he spends his time speaking with firms at both ends of the spectrum, those still experimenting cautiously and those already reshaping how engineering work gets done. In this conversation, Nick describes the profession beginning to be split into two: firms still treating AI as something to observe, and firms already building internal systems, billing agent runtime, and rethinking what engineering value actually looks like when intelligence becomes available on demand. What's striking is that none of this begins with advanced software. It begins with leaders who are curious enough to touch tools themselves, whether it's vibe coding, building lightweight internal apps, using simple site capture technology to change how field information is gathered and used. Because this episode really isn't about whether AI is coming to engineering. It's about something more uncomfortable. When the tools are already here, what separates the firms that compound advantage from the ones who are waiting to understand what has just changed? Welcome to the Structural Intelligence Podcast. Each episode brings together innovators, experts, and thought leaders who are pushing the boundaries of what's possible in engineering and technology. Through deep conversations and practical insights, we explore how new tools, techniques, and mindsets are reshaping our industry. We hope you enjoy this episode. Welcome back to the Structural Intelligence Podcast, the podcast about engineering and how it's all changing. Not just better design, but better technical thinking, but through the way technology is beginning to reshape how we actually work. So today's conversation is one I've been really looking forward to. We're joined by someone who sits right in the middle of that shift. Nick Heim is an engineer by background, the host of the AEC AI Tech Strategy podcast, and someone who spends a huge amount of time speaking directly with firms experimenting with AI, software automation, and digital tools across the built environment. What makes Nick particularly interesting is he sees both ends of the market, from highly advanced small firms building custom workflows all the way through to firms that are just beginning to understand what AI really means for them. So today we're going to talk about practical adoption and what it actually looks like, what the biggest gaps are, and why leadership mindset may matter more than the tools themselves. Welcome, Nick.
Owen, thank you so much for having the time, and thank you for that was a great introduction. So I really appreciate you inviting me on the show here.
Not at all. Look, I've introduced yourself, but I'd love to hear in your own words. What's your background and what are some of the things you do?
Yeah. So simply put, so my background is coming up on a decade here of structural engineering, right, is what my degree's in. Bachelor's and master's from where I went to school here in Cleveland, Ohio. And then I got into an engineering firm just like the rest of us, but my whole career has been in, right, so starting forensics, building envelope, structural restoration, but primarily parking structure restoration, which is its own, right, niche topic here, which I'm sure we'll get into. And then the path that I've gone down now is me and my business partner recently started a firm called Trinovate Advisors. So to your point about us, me seeing signal from both ends of the spectrum from, hey, super technically advanced, less than 10-person firms, all the way to these large enterprises that are still, trying to get ChatGPT rolled out to their people. So we see it all, and it's really interesting. And then we're kind of the bridge between the two, I'd like to say. So I'm really excited to just kind of dig in and just tell my story a little bit, but then give your audience a purview to what I hope is a really unique conversation.
Oh, for sure, for sure. And I've been following your work as well with the AEC and AI and Tech Adoption podcasts. And what have you done? 100 episodes now? What is it?
Yeah, so we're almost at 110, and the unique thing about that one, Owen, is like, so that one, the target market for the firm, the Engineering Management Institute, that has an umbrella of like 5 or 6 podcasts. Great leadership, great team. So I host it through them, but their ICP is really these big engineering firms, like 500 plus people. So like you'll kind of see the evolution of it, but that's primarily who we go after. And then I have a little bit of creative thought sprinkled in where I try to get other personas on, but that's like the big firm end of the spectrum. And it's completely different than guys like you or Kenny or or KP or the other people I've mentioned, kind of my centers of influence, where these big firms, like, it's a different animal because, legacy business structures, some of them are publicly traded. There's a piece to that versus more of the, let's say, guys like yourself that are more agile, nimble, that creative direction with that, let's say that like innovation visionary at the helm versus a traditional CEO. So there's a lot to unpack there, but that's kind of a brief summary before I ramble on.
Oh, for sure. Nah, like it makes sense. I've seen some of that paradigm shift anyway myself, having been in the corporate type of environment, and then probably 3 or 4 years ago, just looking to go out for myself and understanding like how nimble you can actually be. And that was like at a key time for me anyway, which was like, okay, ChatGPT or like the AI stuff started to come through, but then it sort of, I dove into some of those automated workflows and tech adoption for an agile business as well. But going back to sort of your experience and your background, I'd love to hear sort of how you got into you said you're a structural engineer by trade, you sort of started with that, but how did you actually get into the tech space? Like, and how does that evolve for sort of where you're going to now?
That's a great question. So if you go to my LinkedIn profile, for anybody who's curious, like it's right there in my about section, but I'll just tell the story. So 2017, I start at a just huge building envelope and forensics consulting firm, right? Really nationally well known. If you connect the dots and go to my experience section, you'll be able to figure it out pretty quickly. But I remember the first project I went on, it was a roof investigation on like a 1 or 2 story structure. And I'm going out with my principal who, guy's probably in his late 50s. Not that matters, which we'll get into that as a separate topic of discussion. But 11 by 17 clipboard, 11 by 17 set of plans. You're smiling because you know exactly where I'm going with this, and a digital camera. Yeah. And it's, all right, I see a tear in the membrane here. Click, photo 1. And I'm sitting here like, this is the national firm, like the national and world-renowned firm that's supposed to be so sophisticated and advanced, and this is how you guys run your workflows in the field.
Yep.
And from that day, so it was June of 2017 is when I started. I've been on this quest to just figure out a better way to do things. But the flip side is like when I was like 22, 23 at the time. When you're young, right, you don't have a lot of experience, you don't understand how things actually work. It can be a little bit discouraging at first, but then you get your reps in, you get some time in the industry. And I'm personally starting to see it converge where like ideas that I had even like 5 or 10 years ago are able to be brought, kind of dragged into the future and actually implemented. So it's the cool, and that's like one of the recurring themes with artificial intelligence, Claude in particular, is like, dude, you can have an idea in the morning and you can have it cooked up by lunch. Pun totally intended. It's a beautiful thing.
Oh, mate, we could go. I'm looking forward to diving a bit into that. But like, I feel like we're kindred spirits across the divide. Like that's exactly how I felt as well as I was I'm a structural engineer by trade myself, and getting into it, I just like, man, this could be done way better. Like I started with simple forms and other things like that to capture information, but it's a lot about the workflow, and it's interesting to see like one thing that I found particularly is there at every stage I think the tech's actually fair enough advanced to be able to implement it. But it's just the people that can like think about how it can be used as well, the different tools. And like your example there, where you're talking about, hey, this is the leading firm in building envelope and structure envelope, and you structural engineer taking notes and taking a piece of paper and bringing it back. I mean, It's quite an interesting thing. You know?
It's archaic, but then you have to think about the business model behind that specific company, which is just bill hours. Well, Owen, you and I both know that the most efficient way to bill hours is to be inefficient.
Yeah.
And it's not a knock against them, right? It's, big company, great leadership, but that's their model, which is the antithesis of I'll give you an example. That same company, I asked my manager, I found what looked to be promising software to take raster images of plans and details, sections, whatever the case may be, and turn them into vector line work. And then I go to my manager and he's like, well, I don't think we should do this because I don't know how to bill for it. And I'm like, what?
It's a model. It's a business model.
But that's so when you're just starting out, you're 22, 23, a year of experience under your belt. You don't get it because it's why wouldn't they want to do things more efficiently? As you gain more experience, you start to understand the business model and the incentives behind it, right? And all of those things that go into a business that are not technical and left unsaid. And then you start to understand why companies operate why business models are the way and why the world works the way it does. So as much as I love to, geek out and get into the technology, you got to be cognizant of actually kind of dragging it to the real world framework to make sure it actually works in practice.
Oh, for sure. And I think with your work at Trinovate, I think you're probably seeing this shift, these different types of mindsets from different firms and how the old business model or the existing business model is actually trying to plug into something, which is I know AI is hyped up a lot, but I think AI is turning into intelligence on tap in a way,
Yes.
where you don't have, it's not just a tool, but it can reason and it can think past what we could use a tool for previously. And so we actually bill out intelligence by the hour, but now intelligence is now becoming less of a commodity, and it's more ubiquitous in a way. So, where's the business model go from there? Not sure, but I think that's sort of how I'm seeing it at the moment.
And let's give the audience a sneak peek. So you and I are going to jump on with Kenny and Carter in 45 minutes here on Cracked Engineering. So Permit Zip, and if anyone in the audience is curious, you can look them up. Super forward-thinking firm, less than 10 people, right? Kindred spirits with Owen and his firm, Asset Engineers. So what Kenny is doing now is he's got agents running tasks in the background, right? So his thesis is, okay, so for example, let's say he's trying to do some code research or take some notes from a meeting, whatever the case may be, and an AI agent runs and it says, hey, I spent however many minutes and I spent 27 cents in tokens. So currently, and this is going to evolve and it may change by the time this episode is published, but he then bills that out at a 10x rate. So he's going to bill that 27 cents as $2.70. So, and he's working on his contract language, and that's going to show up as, itemized on an invoice. And then there's also notes that his agents are taking specifically outlining what that task consisted of. Now, think about and I'm not sure how the governing bodies work where you are, but there's peer review, but there's no firm is documenting their workflow and thought process to a level that an agent can't. It's just not possible.
That's right.
So that's the future. That's one sneak peek into how this could change. And then another great firm to follow is Raymond Engineering, led by Mike Ramos out of the Southeast in Atlanta. He's a little tighter to the chest, rightfully so, because he works on a lot of federal stuff. But if you sit down and talk to him, and he'd be great to bring on the show, he'll tell you what he's got to the extent that he can. But those are just a couple of examples of not thought leaders, not gurus, not whatever. They run firms today, and that's what they're doing.
That's so interesting, and that's the paradigm shift that I'm experiencing being, and I think we're going to talk about it a bit later as well. But getting my hands dirty with the tools enough to be able to understand that shift of paradigm from the previous, to be able to understand that, okay, that is actually a model that you can actually do. So you talked about the billable hours model, but then billing out tokens at a margin plus the time is quite an interesting model as well.
Well, and then you have to think about, the bridge of, in the real world, it's baby steps, because if I go to a firm at Trinovate and I say, okay, you guys are billing hourly today, can we just jump to fixed fee immediately? And don't get me wrong, some jobs are they're going to bill fixed fee. But I think an easier step is, okay, Your clients understand the idea of billing hours. That's what you do anyway. Okay, well, what's an agent? It's just like I call them, I've been using this term like a child savant where do these like, okay. So you've heard the intern analogy for AI, I'm sure, as we all have.
Yep.
I think it's close, but it's misguided because like an intern knows nothing and has no skills versus like the child savant can, right? They can do anything. They're super smart, but without the guardrails, your guidance, context, like you drop an 8-year-old savant to go run a business today, right? What are they going to do? Fail.
Yeah. What tools do you give them? What context?
Yeah, and because they don't have that real world experience. So where I was going with all this is baby steps, because if we understand that these firms understand this model, well, the baby step is, okay, well, if you're going to use agents, just bill them out like you would a human, but instead of a 3 to 4x multiplier, whatever you want, 10, 15, all that goes back, linking this back to the real world, is like a client doesn't care for them. Some will, but most won't. As long, right, if they're getting the outcome they want at the price they want and the speed, whatever matters to them, do they care if it's an agent or a human doing their work? No, as long as the outcome is reached.
Look, I think that's fundamental to the shift that's going to happen in the next few years is the fact that people are going to find value, and the value is the right price point for what we're trying to achieve as engineers and in delivering a service, right? And to go back to your point, to like we've been talking a bit at a high level as well in terms of agents and things, but to break it down a little bit further for those who don't understand what we're talking about when we're talking about agents, do you just want to fill us in on what that is?
Yeah. So let me just give you just super practical examples, because again, this is where you differentiate the thought leaders and the gurus from the practitioners, because the thought leaders and the gurus can't get specific. So let's actually take a step down. So say I'm Kenny at PermaZip, right? And you showed me an example. So, and I actually have a Substack post on this that goes into greater detail. So if you guys are interested, Trinovate Advisor Substack, and I think it's going to publish tomorrow, like our AI agent, build time or something like that. Can't remember. Mm-hmm. But essentially, so Kenny has these AI agents that exist, right? So in his email and his Slack, right? Files, codes, etc. So they got, I think they were doing some sort of MEP review for a renovation, and then like an architect wanted to add skylights. So went through, looked at the manufacturer's cut sheets, ran some calculations, and basically determined like, hey, this is going to be an issue, because no matter what we do, the thermal load that the skylight induces is like, I'm not a mechanical engineer, so this is a little bit harder for me to think through. If I had AI on my side, it'd be better. But the idea was that no matter what they did from a cooling perspective, the returns were diminishing. So the idea was to just say, hey, like, can we please reconsider this skylight because it's not great for thermal performance? Well, the AI ran those calculations in the background while Kenny was going to do something else. But the idea here is that the 10x multiplier on what he bills out is not because of the agent, it's because of the human operating the controls, checking its output, making sure it's realistic. So the value add is not in the AI, and this is a critical piece, it's in the operator, right? The professional engineer in that seat who's got 15 years of experience and knows how to harness these tools and make the most out of them. So that's the thing, is like, these agents are going to do work on very specific tasks in the business that would otherwise take humans hours.
And to break it down a bit further, I suppose, for the audience. So when I think of agents specifically, I think of basically the AI or the intelligence, the large language model understands the language, paired with the tools that it can use, such as, when you run a calculation, you might have a calculator specifically, deterministically, to then call on. It might be a Python code. It might be written in some other form. It might be written in code or whatever it is. So you can call upon that. It can get the input, you can get the output, make a decision on it, and then pass it along to another specific thing. So you've got tools, and then you've got context. So he understands that he's a mechanical engineer, and he knows this sort of thing. He's got access to codes, standards, other calculations, examples, all of those different things. And then with that, exactly like you said, with the engineer at the helm, he can be able to guide and direct and understand and verify outputs, but in a tenth of the time. So that's sort of how I see it.
And let's get even more practical, dude, because this doesn't have to be complicated. All of these like gurus, like AI, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Say you're a structural engineer and you focus on, right, like light frame commercial. Let's say you're doing like a lot of like 5-on-2 like concrete podiums with like that's popular here in the States, 5 stories of wood on 2 on a podium. And you just run your whole business on like spreadsheets and like tables. It's not my specialty, so if I'm mistaken in any of this, like just take the concept for what it is. But if you like, you don't have to get fancy, right? You can have the agent orchestrate your spreadsheets, or if you have something written in Python, it can do that. Like it doesn't have to be recreating the wheel. It's just a means of managing everything for you, right? In your style of doing things, your company's standards, your company's templates, your company's format, in a way that you do today, just making it more organized. And the cool thing is, like for the deterministic stuff, like AI can simply be the orchestrator, and then it doesn't have to touch anything you don't want it to touch. And you can tell it, hey, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. Like Claude Skills is great for this. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't have to be a black box. It can be what you want it to be. And it's kind of like, it's power to the people, because before, like, I mean, think about how much development time it would take to do this in traditional software engineering cycles.
Just setting up Excel spreadsheets. Like, to be honest,
dude,
so many engineers, they do that. They set up Excel spreadsheets, right? And they put all this logic, they put all this care, and they put all this attention into this Excel spreadsheet. But another practical example here is like, I've just got a, I did a simple one, which is literally I was doing a lot of playgrounds, and it had specific loading criteria in the code. And so I was just like, I'll see if I can spin up a Python app to do this. So I went on to Cursor. So that's one of the tools I use, and use Claude in there, Sonnet 4.6 or whatever. And then I basically pasted in the specific code requirements, got all the formulas in there. And it made the app. It made the Python app. And I said, can you write a front end for it? And it just literally wrote a front end for the browser for it. And I just put my inputs in, and it comes through. I can read that code and I can verify, okay, yeah, that makes sense. All of the things are correct. I can do some checks, but that was it. That was just one thing. So.
And it's beautiful. And like, if you're listening, you're like, I don't know what Cursor is. I don't know what any of this stuff is. So very simply, so if you're an engineer and you like working in Excel, great. So Claude has an Excel plugin. You could do this with a new spreadsheet or an existing spreadsheet. So you have an existing spreadsheet, you know that it works, but you just want to make it a little easier to understand for everybody across your company. You can get into Claude and Excel and just say, hey, like, can you help me analyze this spreadsheet and build an instructions tab that helps everybody else understand it? Then you could say, hey, is there a better way we can format it in Excel using what I already have here, so I'm not starting from scratch? So you don't have to like you can stick to the tools that you know and love. It's just a faster way of working in them, and then making it more understandable to somebody who's not as intimate with the tool or the spreadsheet.
Yeah, for sure. And okay, so to that point, I totally agree with you. Just it does with things like agents and other skills and tools that you can use and plug into your existing apps. It enhances it that level up. I'd like to see for the curious engineers, basically, maybe if you and me can shot fire a list of a few of the different tools that we might use. And I don't know if we need to explain it all. We can maybe even just say the name of it, and they can go off and see it for themselves. But I think it'd be instructive for everybody for some of the things.
And so like, and you're exactly right. So we'll look at this from two different perspectives. So like, I'm going to admit, like, I'm not the greatest structural engineer, but what I love doing is just bringing the stories out of like the super like introverted, nerdy, like our like colleagues. So like the point I'm going to come from and explain in a second, maybe not super applicable to day-to-day structural engineering, but just think about the process and the methodology. So I've got called Owen. So it's called Nick's Content Machine. So it's in Claude. So that's the number one tool for me, Claude. But then there are subsets of different features of Claude, which admittedly these labs don't do a great job of explaining. So I'm going to start with Cowork. You're familiar with Claude Cowork, right, Owen?
I am, but for the audience, I suppose.
Yeah. So simply put, right, guys, when you use like ChatGPT or Claude like in your browser, that's just chat. The idea behind Cowork is you download Claude desktop, and then Cowork lives. I think it's a virtual machine on your computer. It has access to all your files, right? It has access to, if you install the browser extension Claude and Chrome, it can operate your browser automatically as well. So the advantage to Cowork is that it can do a couple of things. So the first thing I will start with are scheduled tasks. So I have what I call my like weekly briefing. So it's going to surface trends from all of my different connected tools. So then I'm going to go to the customize tab on Claude here. Should we screen share? Or?
Oh, look, if you can give it a shot. Yeah.
See what happens, and then I click presentation. I've never actually screen shared in Riverside on a live call, so this is good. This is good. All right, let me know if you can see that.
Let me see. It's coming up. Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, great.
So when you click the customize tab, so the connectors tab is kind of like the tech stack. So think of Claude as the brain, and then the connectors are all the different tools. So I'll just go through from the bottom. So MS365, right? That's connected to my Outlook email and calendar and SharePoint. So it can search all my files, all my emails. Then the same thing with Gmail and Google Calendar, right? So my personal email's on Gmail, and then I've got Google Calendar. Granola is a note taker, and it's actually operating in the background, right? It records all my conversations. Obviously, just tell people that you're recording because, right, we're people, not machines. Gamma is for all sorts of presentations, right? It helps me draft carousels on LinkedIn, helps me with my PowerPoints. Calendly is, let's say the brain for my calendar, syncs my 4 different calendars all in one spot. And then Asana is where we run Trinovate, our business Trinovate, our level 10s every week, tasks, etc. So then Claude is the brain, and these are all the different sources. So like I'd say of these, so email and SharePoint, right? Because I'm surfacing insights from there. Then there's Granola that captures all of my meetings and anything I'm doing, the transcripts, right? Themes and insights. And it all rolls up into these skills. So I'm going to show
just on those skills. I was just looking at that. It's interesting to see that those are some existing platforms that a lot of people are using anyway, right?
Yeah.
That's it. That's their emails. That's the context, and you can actually plug it in. I just wanted to make a note.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to rename this one. It should be Nick's Content Machine. I need to work on renaming that. But so there's an automation system I have end-to-end here, and I need to go update this, which maybe we can show in a second here. But the end-to-end automation system is, and the way I use artificial intelligence is I'm not falling asleep at the wheel. I'm not letting it take the reins. I am simply using it as my thought partner to extend me in a level of creativity I otherwise wouldn't be able to do. So Cowork every Friday afternoon is pulling, right, my voice, which is right here. So it like podcasts and everything, and it knows how I talk, all the frameworks that I like to use. And it's saying, okay, we're gonna draft you 7 posts for this week plus a newsletter. We're gonna surface 3 ideas for your Trinovate Substack. We're gonna co-work together. I'm gonna give it instruction based on and a little bit of additional context it may not have. Right. I'm also working on looking at my phone text messages because that's where the real stuff really happens. And then it's giving me ideas, drafting posts, I edit, then it goes to buffer, which you didn't see in the connectors because that's actually through the API/MCP. And for everybody not familiar with MCPs, Model Context Protocol, Anthropic came up with that as a standard. All the foundational labs adopted it. It's essentially just a way for all of your apps to talk to AI. And if something doesn't have a connector in Claude, if it has an MCP, well, you can just with very basic setup, and Claude can help you with this, get set up. So then the automation system basically has instructions through different skills to say, okay, this is the report you're going to run and send it to me Friday afternoon when I'm free so that I can get all of my content out based on all the conversations I had that past week. And another piece of that is, hey, like I download my LinkedIn data, I shoot it to a folder locally so that Cowork can read it and like say, these are the people who you've been messaging the most. These are your key centers of influence. This is who you should leave a recommendation for, right? Now, all of that goes back to what's scheduled here, right? And you can see my last week briefing, right? Weekly LinkedIn. Everything's always a work in progress, so it's never going to be as polished as I make it sound. But this is like the briefing that came together. Here's the weekly Substack drafter. All that to say, even if you're not big on social media, this isn't your thing, think about how you can set up different systems for your business or your trade, because it's all about systems, and context.
Correct.
And I like to keep discussions around innovation very simple, unless it's like two of us nerding out, because people don't need complexity. They need simplicity. They need to say, okay, I have my 5 tools in my tech stack set up. What is the simplest way I can feed it to a brain, Claude in this case, and start to get real value out of it? And it's not that hard. It's not that hard.
It isn't. Yeah.
I think the hardest piece is knowing what to do with it all once you get set up. And that's where like the creativity piece and the engineer at the controls comes into play. And that's so true, because you think about what you've done in setting up your Claude, right? But everybody wants to, like, I thought that to myself as I was trying to understand where to go with all of this AI stuff or this workflow stuff. And probably over the last 2 years, I've realized that fundamentally, if you have your data or context or files in one spot in a readable manner, easily enough for, say, the AI to pick up, or in a database somewhere, and you're able to pair that together with your understood workflows, like workflows, whether you've got a AI or not, you do one step after another step anyway. And whether you want to plug in AI, that's good. Okay, you can make it quicker. But I've really understood that the fundamentals are your data. If you haven't got the data right, you can't put it in the workflows correctly. And it's just, if you go back to paper, for example, if you were to do drawings and plans, if you didn't have revisions or marked up workflows, who would know what revisions you're on, and who would know what you're working on anyway? But just, it doesn't matter if it's technologically on the computer or elsewhere. You still are using the same type of workflow. So those are the two things I think engineers can really start with, is the data and the workflows. You ever hear of the entrepreneurial operating system, Owen? Ring a bell?
Well, maybe. Enlighten me.
EOS, excellent resource. So if you haven't read the book Traction, guys, highly recommend it. The idea is that every business can be run through this model. And I know, so like my business partner, right? So he had a 50-person engineering firm and sold it, and EOS was the backbone of it. So like, I know, like, seriously, like, I know, like, you'll hear like all of these like thought leaders and gurus and these systems, like, and you're like, okay, this is not going to work for an engineering business. Well, 80% of it will, and it's actually extremely valuable. So one thing they mention is like, hey, you have processes, whether or not you know it or they're documented. And one of the beautiful things about co-working with AI is like, you can just do your normal day-to-day workflow, and it will help you build those processes. And then you might say, okay, like, it's kind of overwhelming. Well, the theory that EOS tells you is like, document the 20% of your processes. It's very Pareto in nature, that gets you 80% of the output, and then leave the rest to, like, right, you hired good people have judgment. Now, if you're going to co-work with AI, you may want to be more explicit. But the cool thing is, if you're co-working with AI, whether you document 20% or 90%, like, it's not that different. Yeah,
definitely. That's fun. Like, when I started really implementing these things in my business. So, it was just me, and I was just thinking about what to do. But I started to pull together those processes, and a lot of my internal, like when I started the automations piece, it wasn't actually on a lot of engineering tasks specifically. It was on let's automate, making sure my billing and invoicing is like solid, like it goes quick. I can click it once and then it goes. Let's work on my inspections workflow, where I can book an inspection. It'll log it in my Notion, which is my database of everything, and it will send me a calendar invite, and it will send a calendar invite to everyone else. And then I can, in a workflow, see the statuses of all my inspections as well. And then there was other things such as just BD, going out and talking to people, logging comms against contacts and doing a CRM type of thing. And it didn't like fully touch my engineering stuff until recently. So a lot of those are ubiquitous to other businesses as well. So,
and I'm pulling up. So what I recommend if you get into EOS. So the first book is called Traction, and then the second book I recommend reading is called Rocket Fuel. So this is a page from the book. So it says one of the theses behind EOS is just keep things simple. So it says, hey, any business for the most part can be split up into these 3 buckets. Well, we just talked about 2 of them, right? So the operations piece, that's like the engineering and being out in the field and the workflows, which I personally think are going to be the hardest to automate away.
Yeah. Yep.
The finance and admin, I'm gonna tell you, like, I'm not a finance guy, but the administrative piece, like, that's exactly what you just talked about. So, okay, engineers, if you're skeptical about AI in the operations box, well, let's talk about what it can do for you on the boxes on either side. Then if you read the book, right, it's going to break it down. They recommend like 3 to 7 buckets total. So like marketing and sales are going to be under obviously the sales and marketing box. And then operations, this is the bread and butter because it's unique to your business, right? So operations and customer service, and then IT, HR, finance in this, let's say, finance admin bucket. So you look at these and Owen says, okay, so I have, so like, let's say the finance end is for a business of your size is relatively automated. Let's say you have a content machine on the front end for marketing and sales. And then your bread and butter is really the operations and customer service, and maybe IT and HR fall to the background until you guys grow to a certain size that justifies it. Who knows? Well, okay, engineers listening, like if you want to keep full control and don't want AI to touch your operations or customer service, no problem. What can it do for you in the other areas of your business, particularly the areas you don't like spending time on anyway? And yeah, exactly. What I love about the AI revolution, dude, like, I'll be honest, like I'm an A player in very key areas. I was also like a D or an F player in certain areas. Well, with AI, I can be a B- in everything.
Yeah, for sure.
I'm not saying I'm going to be A+ with AI, but like, dude, if I hated doing something and I can build a system to delegate it out and then go focus on things I love doing, perfect.
Yeah, no, that's so true. And like being able to sort of break it down a little bit, I think when we jumped into it, talking about that sort of more technical engineering piece, I think you and I come from a forensics background, right? So we've been out there, we've done inspections. That's an on the ground, that's a manual task. It's like, what are we doing here? How do we do it? And then like we're thinking about how to make that better. And I remember us chatting before, and I really wanted to jump into that a little bit because for us, it's pretty contextual, I suppose. But like I've got a few inspection workflows that make my life a lot easier in terms of capture and also reporting. And then I've seen you've been doing things with like 360 cameras and getting paths and all that sort of stuff. We talk about the large language models and the AI stuff, but like there is actually tech here that you can actually implement now that isn't specifically AI, but it's you can play into it. Do you want to talk to that a little bit? Like, I really like the stuff that you did with your cameras and stuff.
Well, thank you. And I could, we could share a couple of videos maybe in the show notes, but all right. So I have another thesis is like, again, going to the gurus and the thought leaders. I hate the term guru. So for what it's worth, a lot of these voices you hear about talking about AI online, right? They work in industries where 100% of the work is done behind a computer.
Yeah.
Great. What about those of us who have to go out in the field and actually go do stuff in the physical world? Well, it's not going to be as efficient, but I think that's a good thing because that's a moat for us, right? We can get really good on the desk-based aspects and continue to improve in the physical world aspects, which are harder to automate and give us that advantage. Give us, of those who are early adopters, an advantage. So one example that I love are 360 cameras. So, and I know you're a user of them, but the beautiful thing is, if you got an Australian audience, we'll have to do the conversion. But $500-600 USD, you can buy a camera off the shelf, So Insta360 X5 is my recommendation for the starter kit. You can go in the States, you can go to Costco, or you can order off Amazon no matter where you are. The idea being is that these cameras record 360 video that you can then play back through the Insta360 Studio app. It's included with the camera, right? If you're in a larger organization or you want more firepower, there are tools specific to our industry. And I'll just throw out Drone Deploy is the one I use. If you're interested in it, just shoot me a message. But the idea is that it takes the 360 video, you give it a starting and stop point on a plan or an exterior wrap if you don't have plans, and it maps the path. So, and this brings up another discussion, is like, how many tools are getting automated away because you don't have to pay the 10 or 15 bucks a month and you can just build them yourselves?
Yeah.
That's one piece. And I was talking to Kenny about this other day, is like, what about the harder technical tools that like aren't as easy to like develop yourself through like a Windsurf, Claude Code, or a Cursor? I think this tends to be one of them. And the benefit to the engineers is like, say you're doing a site visit and you're like, man, I wish I would have taken a photo of that, or I wish I had better context for this close-up I took. No problem. You just hop back into the 360 video like you would, say, like Google Street View. That's it.
Yep.
And to the theme of keeping it simple, like there's more you can do with it, right? If the 360 camera records audio, so you could extract the transcript out and do something with that. Yep. There's a computer vision layer that you could extract the frames, or you could analyze the video, and there's examples of companies doing that. But just to keep it simple, like if you're a small consultancy, just buy the $600 camera off the shelf and play with it, and you don't even need to do anything with AI to make it useful.
No, that's so true. And to that point, I bought myself a set of Meta glasses, and when I'm walking around site, I can just take a photo, and I can just make a call, and I can tell people what I'm actually seeing. I can take a video. Hands-free, I can say, take a video, take a picture. So it sort of makes the capture and workflow a lot easier. And I think all of those little pieces will augment. I really like that 360 camera thing, because you get a snapshot in time for a relatively low price, a really, really low price in comparison to like going out and trying to buy a lot of kit and LiDAR scans and all that sort of stuff. Take that through. You've got all the information that you need, for your reporting.
So that's a great point. And I have a slide somewhere. It's basically the sophistication of reality capture, right? So when we talk reality capture, well, what does everybody have in their pocket? A phone with a camera. That's reality capture. Then we can talk about GoPros, 360 cameras, whatever the case may be. That's like the intro level. Then if you have like an iPhone of a certain model, there's LiDAR on there. Cool. Then we start getting into the bigger pieces. We can talk drones. We can talk SLAM, which is simultaneous localization and mapping. We can talk point scanners, right? All the way up to like 6-figure investments. But what you need to understand is like what's right for your business. And the best way, and you may find for your business, 90% plus of your use cases can be handled by your phone, a 360 camera, and some Meta glasses. One of the three.
Yep.
Don't spend the money on this stuff if you don't need to.
Yeah. And I think sort of segueing a little bit. So we talked a bit about adoption, AI, maybe some of the different feelings of like larger to more agile consultancies. We talked about some of the tools that we're using. We talked about some of the practical uses like on site and in the engineering field. And all of those things tie back to me as one thing is curiosity, right? And so that's the thing that I see that will be the advantage for engineers in the future will be the fact that they play with it, they experiment with it, and they actually like experience it in a way. And I think that's the main thing. They have to do it.
And maybe there's maybe the 3 C's, right? Creativity, curiosity, and context. Yep. Let's trademark that. And I'll bring a couple of different concepts here. So EOS, if you read Rocket Fuel, which I showed, it talks about the visionary and the integrator in any company. So the visionary is kind of as it explains, right? You're the one with the big ideas, right? I'm a visionary. We got 24 ideas a day. Then the integrator is the one who like runs the nitty gritty of the business. And if you can read the book and take a test to figure out which one you are. And where I'm going with this is I've got this concept of the innovative visionary, where like you're not passing all this stuff off to your director of innovation. or your IT team or the young gun in your company that you go, hey, like you're young and you're into this AI stuff, go research it. No, like you're the one in that seat, you're running the company and you're like, no, I understand this is going to completely change our business in the next 3, 5, 10 years. I'm going to be the one hands-on on the tools, figuring this stuff out. And the analogy I like to use, Owen, is like trying to get somebody to understand how quickly AI is moving and what it can do to somebody who doesn't use it is like trying to get somebody to taste a dish at a restaurant through a photo. It's not happening.
Yep. I totally agree with that. And I think the advantage of being able to be curious enough to be able to just experiment, use it, play with it now will be the backbone to all of the sort of disruptive innovation that's coming through from these either smaller businesses that are coming through now and moving on. I think personally, I think the incumbents and some of the more corporate type of arrangements make it harder for that innovation to really thrive unless they have a really, really good culture behind it. Like they really need a good culture around letting people do what they want with the tools and figuring stuff out. But certainly if you wanted just to start up your own sort of thing and start to integrate some of this stuff, like I pay for bits and pieces, some of it's useful, some of it's useless. But in the process of doing that, I'm like, man, this stuff is good. I'm using this,
and you learn. And that's the cool thing. Yeah. And then you can document all of your learnings through skills and something like Claude.
Correct.
So you don't lose it.
Yeah.
Like there's no way that you as a human can be better than an artificial intelligence in tracking all this stuff. No way. So don't fight a losing battle. Just think about what makes you as a person unique, what AI is really good at, and start to either delegate or just make the decision, hey, AI is going to be better at certain things than I am. I'm going to offload it to them and I'm going to focus my time on the things that either AI will never be good at, that's human, or is going to take it a long time to do.
Yep. So
you may be asking, okay, Nick, like that's great in theory, but what does some of that consist of? Okay, so getting on a podcast with someone like Owen, talking to someone, it sounds so basic as I think about it, but I think it needs to be said. Being able to go to someone like one-on-one, look them in the eye, have a conversation, right? Not being like phone heads down and texting and all this other garbage that I think people who were brought up on this stuff do. Getting in front of a live audience, presenting, right? Working on your posture, your tone, your delivery, your speed, all of that stuff where all of everything we've talked about from innovation, technology, AI is great scaffolding, but then to get people to trust you, like you got to look like you know what you're doing. So those are the skills I think you should work on for delivery and maximum impact. So you can merge, right? Like the technology, the nerdy engineering, right? We're totally nerding out right now. And then getting everybody else to trust you because you actually look like you know what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, look, it's a journey, and it's awesome to be able to have a conversation with someone that sort of is in a similar spot, And I really love your perspective because I think you come from the grassroots understanding, like the practical engineering side of stuff. The hype isn't necessarily there, but the certainty of like actually these tools are specifically powerful enough to be able to make a change right now, and then in the future is going to make a big change. Is such a good approach. That's what I say.
And I appreciate that. And it is, to me, and I'll say it on the record, it is hard to understate the impact that artificial intelligence will have on everything. But don't take it from, generic news sources. Don't take it from a guru who makes a living off, selling courses and content. Don't take it from somebody who has, is from an industry where 100% of their work can be done behind a computer. Take it from the people who are doing what you're doing and can show you proof. Don't take generic platitudes. Don't take thought leader BS that has no specificity. Go look for people like Owen and Kenny. I've mentioned Mike, KP, all great people to follow who are actually doing it and can show you proof. Because then, proof's in the pudding. If you can see what they're doing and you're saying oh, it's real. Okay, well now I can trust you.
Yeah, and one thing I think is understated is the fact that we are domain experts in our craft. And as a structural engineer myself, I remember having chats and I'm like, I want to build this app, right? And so I go talk to a bunch of software engineers and they tell me how how I want to build it and what I want to do with it. And I sort of went through 6 months of this because I had a thought of sort of developing something. And then I came to the realization, why don't I just build it myself? Being the domain expert, understanding how these things are going to be used and just telling it what I want and you can build it. And I've just, why not?
And I was going to say maybe another and I know you've had a few people who've come on the show who were building technology. I'd be really curious. So Owen, what's popular over in Australia in terms of structural analysis software?
Oh, look, we got our typical things. One of the main ones is called Space Gas, which is very Australian. It's an Australian
I know you guys have
software.
You guys have SkySieve too, right?
We got SkySieve. That's got a few more things like API plugins on the cloud as well. But we've got a lot of desktop applications, things like Structural Toolkit and like just all that sort of stuff. Not a lot of things that have sort of caught on, but there are some.
And so over here in the States, there's tons of examples, but the legacy players, not mean that in a bad way, they've just been around long. So CSI, Computers and Structures Inc. Yep. So shout out to Ashraf. He is an inspiration to the profession. SAP 2000 and a couple of other of his products. RISA is another big one, right? We got MathCAD, all sorts of things. I'd be really curious if you got one of those legacy players on the show and it's how has your software development process changed?
Actually, funny you say that because I do have the CEO of Space Gas on the next release. So,
okay, that's perfect.
You have to check that one. You have to check that one out because we do talk about how he thinks about the development and how he's going to plug into what's going to come. So, and that's the first and foremost structural engineering software that we use in Australia. So,
so beautiful.
Watch the space.
You've got it covered.
Yeah, there you go. So, look, Nick, I could talk for a long time, and I'm sure I'd love to have you on the show again. We can talk about a few other things and bits and pieces and be more specific. But I just appreciate your perspective and the things that you're doing in the AEC space with the background that you have, but the attitude that you're going towards it, because I resonate with that completely. So I really appreciate that, and I want to say thank you. So
yeah, absolutely. And then the one thing I'll close out that I just thought about. So, man, the last thing I'm thinking about with this content machine is actually going to mine more of the hardcore technical. No, I'll say maybe hardcore is not the right word. You guys use Eng tips? Or do you read it in Australia?
Yeah, I've seen it. I haven't used it too much though.
So what I always fear, because don't get me wrong, I'm probably I'm not the greatest structural engineer. So my career is just taking a different path, right? So I leave it to the real experts. But what I'm toying with is starting to mine Reddit and Eng tips and other through this automation to surface what we hear with even within the domains of engineering, right? There's voices like mine, I'm not practicing. I'm not doing the engineering as much more day to day. But then there's people that are absolutely in the weeds, and they're not going to get on LinkedIn. You're not going to see them posting. You're not going to see them sharing content. But what they will do is go anonymous on something like Reddit or Eng tips and share stuff that they never would in a public forum. So I'm starting to try to figure out a way to mine that and then get those voices out. Even though I'm not going to be able to link them back to a person. But just the stuff they'll say AI doesn't work, or I think my firm is completely unprepared. It's kind of I don't know, structural engineering after dark, right? So I gotta toy with that and see what I come up with.
Nah, for sure. I think the voices need to be heard, and I think a lot of those in our profession, we do just get to it and get the work done. There's not a lot of content creators. There's not a lot of people trying to show themselves, and even myself, I feel a bit of imposter syndrome going out there and trying to do this. But I saw that there was a specific need for people to share as well. I agree with you. I totally agree.
And I felt the same way. And you know what I said? Would you rather it just be a bunch of salespeople who just don't stop yapping about shit we don't care about? Or would you rather have somebody who's been in the profession, is in the nitty gritty? And in my case, I'm not practicing as much day to day because I'm doing other stuff. But would you rather have the BS gurus, or would you rather listen to somebody who's been there alongside you?
Yeah, exactly.
And you're providing value. So
that's great. Oh, look, Nick, pleasure to speak to you. Thanks again for coming on the show, and yeah, I think we'll wrap it up there. So thanks again.
Beautiful. Yeah, my pleasure, Owen. Thank you so much, and I really hope the audience gets a lot out of this one.
Yeah, sounds great. Cheers, Nick.
Catch ya.